there, and welcome back. And now we move to chapter 4, negotiation, strategy, and planning. And so, as we move to chapter 4, we are getting, I know you probably have a lot of questions, there's a lot of content, but as we go through, things will become, and we have more discussions in the class, things will become more apparent to you. So I'm hoping again that the videos help. They at least put that content in your ear. I find that the best way to learn many things from based on the various learning styles people is to hear it, to read it, and to experience it. And so the experience, a lot of things we've already experienced, we just have to apply that experience to what we're learning. And so with that said, let's move, I wanna share my screen now with the PowerPoint, and we'll get started on chapter 4. So goals. The first step in a negotiation strategy is to determine your goals, substantive, intangible, or procedural goals. There are 4 direct ways that goals affect negotiations. Wishes are not goals, especially in negotiation. And a negotiator's goals may be linked to the other party's goals. There are limits on what realistic goals can be. Effective goals must be concrete, specific, and measurable. Indirectly, short term thinking affects our choice of strategy. We may lose sight of the relationship in favor of the outcome. Difficult or complex goals may require a long range plan for goal attainment. Strategy, the plan to achieve your goals. After negotiators articulate goals, they move to the second element in the sequence, and that's selecting and developing a strategy. This is how business strategy experts define strategy: the pattern or plan that integrates an organization's targets, policies, and action sequences into a cohesive whole. Here's a definition for strategy as applied to negotiations: the overall plan to accomplish one's goal in a negotiation and the action sequences that will lead to the accomplishment of these goals. So, strategy versus tactics. A major difference between strategy and tactics is the scale, perspective, and intimacy. Tactics are short term, adaptive moves designed to enact strategies. Tactics are subordinate to the strategy. A unilateral choice is made without active involvement of the other party. Here, a dual concerns here a dual concern model asks 2 questions of a negotiator's unilateral choice of strategy. How much concern does the negotiator have for achieving the substantial outcomes at the stake in this negotiation? And how much concern does the negotiator have for the current or future quality of the relationship with the other party? The dual concerns model, substantive outcomes important. So yes, relational outcomes, collaborations, competition, no accommodation, and avoidance. Alternative situational strategies. There are at least 4 different types of strategies. A strong interest is only substantial outcome supports a competitive distributor strategy. A strong interest is only the relationship goals suggest an accommodation strategy. If both substance and relationship are important, pursue a collaborative, integrative strategy. If neither outcomes is important to you, consider avoiding negotiation altogether. Each approach has implications for negotiation planning and preparation. So the non-engagement strategy, avoidance. There are reasons to choose not to negotiate. If you can meet your own needs, avoid negotiating. It may not be worth the time and the effort. Attractive alternatives provide a reason to avoid negotiations. A negotiator with strong alternatives has considerable power. It can influence the decisions about whether to avoid negotiation strictly or efficiency grounds. And the example I use about housing, sometimes we can go with this housing and sometimes we don't want to go with it, buying the house. I mean, for me, I don't need it. I like it, but I don't need it. So I have alternatives. And so I can choose to negotiate or not to negotiate. I can choose when to cut off negotiations or continue further. Same thing with a car. I'm just using basic things we have. And we can relate those to things that we may be doing around the business table. So know what you're going in for and why. But having a weak alternative may suggest avoiding negotiations. Negotiators may accept poor outcomes when the alternative is poor. Active engagement strategies. Accommodation is as much a win-lose strategy as competition. Now, is imbalance is the other direction. I lose, you win. Use to build relationships, the accommodation method. Each of the three active engagement strategies, accommodation, competition, and collaborations, have drawbacks. Distributive strategies distort the other side's contributions, motives, needs, and position. Integrative strategies without regard to reciprocity allows others to manipulate and exploit the collaborator and take advantage. Accommodative strategies may generate a pattern of giving and to keep the other people happy or avoid a fight. We know about that. The flow of negotiation stages and phases. So research studies show that the flow of negotiation through stages or phrases. One model relevant to integrative negotiation suggests that 7 key steps to an ideal negotiation process. That's preparation, relationship building, information gathering, information using, bidding, closing a deal, implementing the agreement. Negotiators' actions typically deviate from this prescriptive model. So the planning process. Define the negotiating goal, defining the major issues related to the achieving that goal, assimilating the issues, ranking their importance, and defining the bargaining mix, defining the interests and knowing the alternatives or factors, knowing your limits, including resistance points, analyzing and understanding the other party's goals, issues, and resistance points, setting your own targets and opening bids, assessing the social context of the negotiations, and presenting the issues to the other party's substance and process. So defining the negotiation goal. Remember that goals can be substantial or intangible, psychological or intangible, substantial or tangible, psychological or intangible, procedural or how to get it to an agreement. Goals can both direct and indirect effects make the choice of strategy. So goals have both direct and indirect effects on the choice of strategy. Knowing your own goals is the first and most important step in developing a strategy and executing negotiations. So in defining the major issues for achieving a goal, single issue negotiations tend to end in distributive negotiations. Multiple issues negotiations tend to be more integrative. Now, the choice between a claiming value or creating a value strategy is described as the negotiator's dilemma. While the number of issues affects strategy, it does not mean single issue negotiations cannot be made integrative, or that multiple issue negotiations will remain distributive. A list of issues is best derived from these sources. An analysis of all possible issues that need to be decided, previous experience is similar in similar negotiations, as well as research conducted to gather information. Consultation with experts in that industry are also important. So how issues affect between distributive and integrative strategy, look at this and look at the axle. And you can see common value, creating value, increasing value to seller, increasing value to buyer. There's a balance between the two. Issue importance and bargaining mix. Assemble all the issues into a comprehensive list and combine lists from both sides to determine the bargaining mix. Now you want to prioritize the issues in 3 steps. Determine which issues are most important and less important. Rank, order, group, and assign points in proportion to the importance of intangibles or difficult to prioritize, but try. Now, determine whether the issues are linked or separate. Separate issues are easily added or subtracted. Concessions are connected issues tied into other issues. Remember that. Be willing to use carrots and sticks. Create incentives to motivate the others toward towards your high priority issues, and disincentives to motivate them away from the low priorities issues. So sticks are the disincentives, and the incentives are the carrots. Defining interests. After defining the issues, negotiators proceed to define underlying issues and needs. Positions are what a negotiator wants. Interests are why they want them. Like goals, interests fall into three groups: substantive, directly related to the focal issues under negotiations, and process-based, how the negotiators behave as they negotiate. Relationship-based, tied to the current or future relationship, and interests may also be based on intangibles of negotiations. So knowing your alternatives. Good preparation requires that you establish two clear points: your alternatives if this deal cannot be successfully completed, your limits, the least acceptable offer you will sign. Managers are other agreements negotiators could achieve and still meet their needs. So going back and forth, understanding stuff, seeing another way. Alternatives are really important in both distributive and integrative processes, and they define whether the current outcome is best. The better the alternatives, the more power you have, as you can walk away from the current deal and still meet your needs and interests. Know your limits, guys, including resistance. A resistance point is the place you should stop negotiations. A settlement beyond this point is not minimally acceptable. Setting resistance point is a crucial part of planning. Clear resistance points to help keep people from agreeing to deals they later realized they were not very smart. So the other goals, issues, and resistance points. Gathering information about the other party is critical. The goal is to understand how the other party is approaching the negotiation and what they are likely to want. If impossible before deliberations, collect information during the opening stages. Try to understand if the other party has the same goals as you. Get a sense of their issues and bargaining mix using business history, financial data, and inventories. Visit or ask questions about others. Uncovering their interests and needs may require a meeting. Understanding the other's limits and alternatives gives you information on how far you can push them. Setting your targets and opening bids. When setting targets, keep these principles in mind. Targets should be specific, difficult, but achievable and verifiable. Target setting requires proactive thinking about your own objectives. Consider how to package several issues and objectives. Understand trade-offs and throwaways. An opening bid may be the best possible outcome, an ideal solution, or something even better than achieved last time. Beware of overconfidence. Do not set an opening with that is so unrealistic, the other party gets angry or walks away from responding. Assessing the social context of negotiations. When people negotiate in a professional context, there are many more than two parties. A field analysis can be used to assess all the key parties. Who is or should be on your team or on your side of the field? Who is on the other side of the field? Who is on the sidelines and can affect the play of the game? Who is in the stands? What is going on in the broader environment in which the negotiation takes place? A number of other context issues can affect negotiations. such as the history of the game, relationship between parties, and what relationship they desire in the future, deadlines, and even other rules. So, presenting these issues, substance, and processes, presenting and framing the issues, consider how to present your case to the other negotiator, providing facts and counter arguments to refute their anticipated arguments, planning the process and structuring the context by which information is presented. Consider these elements. What agenda should we follow? Where should we negotiate? Who should we begin? How should we begin? What is the time period of the negotiation? How will we keep track of what is agreed to? Have we created a mechanism for modifying the deal if necessary? And that's it for chapter 4. Yes, we are getting there, aren't we? So, with us closing out chapter 4, we have learned a lot about negotiations and how negotiation strategy and planning really works and the goals around those things. Remember, the first step in any negotiation strategy is to determine your goals, whether they be substantial, intangible, or procedural goals. And remember, there are 4 direct ways that goals affect negotiation. Wishes are not goals, especially in negotiations. A negotiator's goals may be linked to the other party's goals, and there are limits to what realistic goals can be. And effective goals must be concrete, specific, and measurable. All right, so that is it for chapter 4 today. I'll see you in chapter 5 in Coffee and Conversation. Take care.